I had enough of her nonsense. You won't believe how she ended up on the streets. Marcus Chen straightened his tie as the elevator ascended to the 14th floor of the Evergreen Technologies building. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls, casting a golden glow that matched his optimism. 5 years of dedication had finally paid off with his recent promotion to project manager for the company's most promising initiative, a sustainable energy monitoring system that could revolutionize how businesses track their carbon footprint. As the doors opened, he nodded to the receptionist, Janice, who smiled warmly. Congratulations again on the promotion, Marcus. The team's lucky to have you. Thanks, Janice. Just hoping to live up to expectations, he replied, his modesty genuine despite the pride he felt. The office was already buzzing with activity. His team of 8 developers and designers had formed a tight-knit unit over the past few months. They respected his technical knowledge and appreciated how he shielded them from corporate politics, allowing them to focus on innovation rather than bureaucracy. Marcus settled at his desk, reviewing the project timeline before the morning stand-up. His phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. Dinner reservation confirmed for tonight. So proud of you. He smiled, thinking about how supportive his fiancée had been throughout his career journey. The celebration dinner had been her idea, a way to mark this milestone that had seemed so distant when he started as a junior developer with student loans and big dreams. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Marcus looked up to see Karen Winters, the HR director, standing in his doorway. With her perfectly styled blonde bob, designer suit, and perpetual frown, Karen had a reputation for being the company's self-appointed gatekeeper. In her 15 years at Evergreen, she gained influence through her connection to the founder's family and her uncanny ability to make herself indispensable despite the high turnover in her department. "We need to talk," she said, her voice crisp and cold. "Now." Marcus followed her to a small conference room, confusion mounting as he noticed Director James Thompson already seated inside, his usually friendly face uncharacteristically stern. "Marcus, serious allegations have been brought to our attention," Karen began without preamble, placing a folder on the table with theatrical precision. "We have reason to believe you've been extracting confidential company information and possibly sharing it with competitors." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "What? That's absolutely not true. What information am I supposed to have taken?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Our security team has flagged unusual download patterns from the server containing our proprietary algorithms. The logs show your credentials were used." "That's impossible," Marcus protested, his mind racing. "I've been downloading documentation for the new project, but nothing confidential or inappropriate." James finally spoke, disappointment evident in his voice. "Marcus, I've always believed in you. This is troubling, to say the least." "I've initiated a formal investigation," Karen continued, seeming almost pleased. "In the meantime, your access to sensitive systems will be restricted, and you'll report directly to me until this matter is resolved." "This is absurd," Marcus said, struggling to maintain his composure. "I've given everything to this company. Why would I risk that now, especially after my promotion?" "Perhaps the promotion wasn't enough," Karen suggested, her implication clear. "Some people's ambition knows no bounds." As they left the conference room, Marcus noticed several colleagues quickly averting their eyes. The news had somehow already spread. Near the break room, he overheard a whispered conversation. Karen said she'd been tracking him for weeks. Apparently there's solid evidence. By lunchtime, the camaraderie that had defined his workplace experience had evaporated. His team members were distant, responding to his questions with clipped answers before finding reasons to return to their desks. His calendar notifications chimed. Meeting invitations were being canceled one by one. As Marcus sat alone in the company cafeteria, his untouched food growing cold, he watched Karen talking animatedly with the heads of several departments, occasionally glancing in his direction. The sinking feeling in his stomach told him this was just the beginning of her campaign against him. What he couldn't understand was why she had targeted him at all. His phone buzzed again. Alicia asking what wine he preferred for dinner. Marcus stared at the message, realizing that tonight's celebration had just become something entirely different. The following weeks unfolded like a carefully orchestrated nightmare for Marcus. Each morning he forced himself to walk through Evergreen Technologies' sleek glass doors, head held high despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. The investigation dragged on without updates, creating a suspended reality where he could neither defend himself properly nor move forward. Karen had implemented what she called temporary reassignments for his project team. By the end of the first week, Marcus found himself stripped of all meaningful work, relegated to reviewing outdated documentation and filing reports that no one would read. His desk had been relocated to a corner near the supply closet, away from his former team and conveniently visible from Karen's office. "It's just procedural," James Thompson had told him during their last one-on-one meeting, avoiding eye contact as he spoke. "Once this is cleared up, everything will go back to normal." But Marcus could see the doubt in his mentor's eyes. James, who had championed his promotion just weeks ago, now maintained a professional distance. The daily lunches and impromptu brainstorming sessions they once shared had evaporated, replaced by formal emails and brief, uncomfortable encounters in the hallway. "Karen's just doing her job," James added, fidgeting with his watch. "The company has to protect its intellectual property." Marcus bit back the response he wanted to give, that Karen seemed more interested in destroying him than protecting anything. Instead, he nodded and watched as another ally slipped away. The annual leadership retreat email arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Marcus had been looking forward to the 3-day event at Lake Tahoe, where he would have presented his team's innovation roadmap. Opening the message, he found a brief note from Karen's assistant. Asterisk, due to ongoing administrative matters, your participation in the upcoming leadership retreat has been canceled. Please submit any presentation materials to your department head by Thursday. Asterisk. That evening, Marcus entered his apartment to find Alicia waiting, arms crossed, her expression a mix of concern and frustration. "Your boss called today," she said before he could kiss her hello. "James, he wanted to make sure you were doing okay given the circumstances. Funny thing is, he wouldn't tell me what those circumstances were." She uncrossed her arms. "What's going on, Marcus?" "You've been distant for weeks, coming home late, barely sleeping." Marcus sank onto their couch, exhaustion washing over him. He hadn't told Alicia the full extent of the situation, hoping it would resolve before affecting their personal life. That barrier had clearly fallen. "They think I stole company information," he said finally, the words bitter on his tongue. "Karen from HR has launched an investigation. It's all completely false, but she's turning everyone against me." Alicia sat beside him, taking his hand. "Then quit. Find another job. Your skills are in demand. You've had recruiters calling for years." "It's not that simple," Marcus explained, running a hand through his hair. "If I leave now with this cloud hanging over me, Karen wins. Word travels fast in this industry. She'd make sure I couldn't get hired anywhere reputable." "So you'll just stay there being miserable? For how long?" Alicia's voice rose slightly. "This is affecting us too, you know. We haven't talked about the wedding plans in weeks. You're either working late or too exhausted to engage when you're home." The wedding. Their October date was approaching, deposits paid, invitations ready to send. Another dream that now felt in jeopardy. "I just need time to clear my name," Marcus insisted. Alicia's silence spoke volumes. Later that night, he found her looking at apartment listings in another city. "Just exploring options," she said quietly. "Maybe we both need a fresh start somewhere else." The following day brought another blow. Marcus's corporate card was declined as he tried to pay for lunch with his only remaining work friend, Dev from IT. The cashier's loud announcement drew stares from nearby tables, including several Evergreen employees. Back at the office, a terse email from finance informed him that his expense privileges had been revoked pending investigation results. Walking past the conference room, he glimpsed Karen leading a meeting with his former team, her nephew Tyler sitting prominently at her right hand. Tyler, recently hired as a departmental consultant, caught Marcus's eye through the glass and smirked. That evening, checking his personal accounts, Marcus discovered his company's stock options had been frozen. 3 weeks of psychological warfare had systematically dismantled 5 years of career building. As he stared at his computer screen, the reality of his situation became painfully clear. Karen wasn't just trying to push him out, she was methodically destroying everything he had worked for. The email arrived at 8:47 a.m. on a Monday, 3 months after Karen's initial accusation. Marcus stared at his screen, the formal language swimming before his eyes. Placed on unpaid administrative leave effective immediately, pending final determination, required to surrender company property. He'd known this was coming. The signs had been there in the increasingly cold interactions, the whispers that stopped when he entered rooms, the projects reassigned one by one. Still, seeing it in writing made it real in a way that twisted his stomach into knots. Human Resources Assistant Director Melissa Parks stood awkwardly by his desk, tasked with escorting him out. She'd been friendly once before becoming Karen's protege. "I need your laptop, badge, and any other company property," she said, not meeting his eyes. I'm sorry it's come to this, Marcus." As he silently packed his few remaining personal items into a cardboard box, a coffee mug from Alicia, a small plant, a framed photo of his teen from better days, Marcus felt dozens of eyes on him. The open office layout that had once symbolized Evergreen's collaborative culture now felt like a public execution square. "Your personal email will receive updates regarding the investigation," Melissa continued mechanically. "Please don't attempt to contact current employees during this period." The elevator ride down was mercifully empty. Outside, spring had arrived while Marcus had been too preoccupied to notice. Cherry blossoms lined the street, their delicate pink petals swirling in the breeze, nature's celebration contrasting cruelly with his professional funeral. He couldn't face going home to the apartment where Alicia had left a note 3 weeks ago, "Staying with my sister," until we figure things out. Call me when you're ready to talk about our future, not just Evergreen's witch hunt. Their relationship had become another casualty of Karen's campaign, strained to breaking point by his obsessive focus on clearing his name. Instead, Marcus found himself at Riverview Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. The same bench where he drafted his 5-year career plan when he first joined Evergreen. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed. A text from Dev, the IT specialist who had remained cordial though distant. Heard what happened. Not right. Call if you need anything. A small kindness that somehow made the pain sharper. Hours passed. When hunger finally drove him to move, Marcus walked to Castello's, an Italian restaurant 4 blocks from the office. It had been a team favorite for celebrations. Tonight, he just needed their strong coffee and a quiet corner to think about what remained of his life. The restaurant was crowded for a Monday, forcing him to take a table near the bar. Over the ambient noise of clinking glasses and conversation, a familiar voice cut through, making Marcus freeze mid-sip. Honestly, the evidence was flimsy at best, but the board doesn't question HR recommendations when it comes to security threats. Karen Winters sat at the bar, martini in hand, speaking to a younger woman Marcus didn't recognize. He sank lower in his seat, heart pounding. Wasn't it risky, though? The younger woman asked. He seemed well-liked. Karen laughed, the sound like broken glass. Popularity doesn't equal power, Emma. I've been building my network at Evergreen for 15 years. Marcus was there for what, 5? Besides, his type is predictable. Too ethical to fight dirty, too proud to just quit. She took a sip of her drink. The unpaid leave was the final touch. He'll be desperate for income soon, forced to look elsewhere. And with the pending investigation on his record, and Tyler gets his position, Emma concluded with admiration. Your nephew is lucky to have you. Family first, Karen replied. Tyler graduates next month. James has already approved creating a special projects director role for him. Perfect for someone with fresh perspective and untapped potential. Her air quotes dripped with sarcasm. What if Marcus somehow proves his innocence? Emma asked. The coffee shop 2 miles from Evergreen Technologies headquarters had become Marcus's makeshift office. Far enough to avoid accidental encounters with former colleagues, yet close enough to the business district to not raise eyebrows when he needed to meet people. He chose a corner table, back to the wall, laptop open to a job search site, camouflage for anyone who might recognize him. Devin Wu arrived exactly on time, dressed in the standard 8 uniform of jeans and a company-branded polo shirt. As one of Evergreen's senior network specialists, Devin had always been friendly but professional with Marcus, never close enough to be caught in Karen's crosshairs. Thanks for meeting me, Marcus said, sliding a coffee across the table. I wasn't sure you'd come. Devin glanced around before sitting. I almost didn't. Karen's been on a warpath since you left. Anyone associated with you gets extra scrutiny. He took a sip of coffee. But what she did wasn't right, even if half the company's afraid to say it. Marcus leaned forward. I need to understand something. Was I targeted specifically, or does Karen have a history of this? The question hung in the air as Devin seemed to calculate risks and rewards. Finally, he set down his cup. You're not the first. There was Anita Patel before you, brilliant product manager who questioned Karen's hiring decisions. She was gone within 6 months, reputation in tatters. Then Michael Okafor from legal, who suggested an ethics audit of all departments. He was fired for mishandling confidential documents. As Devin continued, a pattern emerged. Anyone who threatened Karen's power, questioned her methods, or simply occupied a position she coveted for her network had been systematically eliminated. Some had been fired outright, others driven to quit. All had their professional reputations damaged in the process. Why doesn't anyone stop her? Marcus asked, frustration evident in his voice. Fear, Devin replied simply. Plus, she's careful. Creates just enough legitimate doubt that HR and legal can justify her recommendations. And she's been James Thompson's right hand for years. They started at Evergreen together. Their conversation was interrupted by a text notification on Marcus's phone. It was from Lauren Martinez, Evergreen's former diversity and inclusion officer, who had abruptly pursued other opportunities last year. She had agreed to meet him tomorrow. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus quietly connected with 7 former employees who had experienced Karen's manipulation firsthand. Each meeting added pieces to the puzzle, dates, incidents, patterns. He created secure digital records of their testimonies, carefully organized and cross-referenced. Samantha Reeves, once the company's most successful sales director, met him at a park across town. She fabricated customer complaints against me, Samantha explained, still visibly angry 2 years later. When I demanded to speak to these supposedly dissatisfied clients, I was told it would violate confidentiality protocols. 3 clients reached out after I left to ask why I'd suddenly abandoned their accounts. Lawrence Chen, a former finance analyst, shared detailed notes he kept documenting irregular approval processes for vendor contracts that Karen had influenced. Always companies with connections to her social circle, Lawrence explained. Always with terms slightly more favorable than industry standard. Nothing outrageous enough to trigger alarms, but enough to raise questions. When I did raise those questions, he shrugged. You know how that story ends. The most illuminating conversation came from Zoe Fitzgerald, who had worked as Karen's executive assistant for 9 months. She keeps detailed files on everyone in leadership. Zoe revealed over lunch at a quiet cafe. Personal information, potential weaknesses, office relationships, anything that might be useful leverage. And she records conversations on her phone. I saw her do it during one-on-ones all the time. Isn't that illegal in this state without consent? Marcus asked. Completely, Zoe confirmed. But who's going to challenge her? The email from Devin arrived at 3:17 a.m. A-board, security sweep scheduled for tonight. Too risky. Marcus stared at his phone in the darkness of his apartment, exhaustion and disappointment washing over him. After weeks of careful planning, another setback threatened to derail their momentum. Without access to those archived emails, they had compelling testimonies but lacked the definitive evidence needed to counter Karen's influence. Evergreen's leadership would likely view their collective stories as disgruntled ex-employees conspiring against a loyal executive. Sleep eluded him. By dawn, Marcus had moved from his bed to the kitchen table, staring vacantly at the case he built. Documents spread out, connections mapped with colored strings on a corkboard like a detective in a crime drama. It would have been comical if his entire future wasn't hanging in the balance. His phone buzzed with a news alert from the business section. Evergreen Technologies CEO Victoria Chen returns from Asia-Pacific expansion tour. The accompanying photos showed a striking woman in her late 40s stepping off the company jet, her expression determined as she spoke to reporters. Victoria Chen. Marcus had met her only twice during his tenure at Evergreen. Both times she had been direct, incisive, and surprisingly warm for someone running a billion-dollar tech company. She built Evergreen from a small startup to an industry leader, maintaining a reputation for both innovation and integrity, rare in their cutthroat industry. She might be our only hope, Marcus murmured to himself, an idea forming. Victoria was known for her hands-on leadership style and zero tolerance for internal politics. If anyone could see through Karen's machinations, it would be her. Requesting a meeting with the CEO was a massive risk. If Karen caught wind of it, she'd accelerate her campaign against him. If Victoria dismissed his concerns, he'd lose his final chance at redemption. But the alternative, accepting defeat and walking away, was unthinkable after everything he'd endured. Marcus drafted and redrafted his email a dozen times before sending it from a new secure account. The message was brief, professional, and deliberately vague about his concerns, mentioning only serious governance issues requiring your personal attention and his former position at the company. He expected to be ignored or redirected to HR. Instead, a response arrived within hours. Mr. Chen, I have a 30-minute window tomorrow at 7 a.m. My private office. Come through the executive garage entrance. Bring whatever evidence you reference. Victoria Chen. The following morning, Marcus arrived at Evergreen's headquarters before sunrise, heart pounding as he approached the security guard at the executive entrance. To his surprise, his name was on the cleared list. The guard escorted him through private elevators and corridors he'd never seen during his years with the company. Victoria's office was nothing like he'd imagined, not the sterile glass box typical of tech executives, but a warm space with wooden furniture, well-worn books, and framed photos of her with staff at company events. She stood as he entered, extending her hand. Marcus Chen, your sustainable energy monitoring project was impressive. I was sorry to hear about your departure while I was away. Her directness was jarring after months of corporate doublespeak. Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Chen. I know how valuable your time is. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. You mentioned governance issues. I presume this relates to your termination? Administrative leave. Marcus corrected automatically, then took a deep breath. Ms. Chen, I believe I've been targeted as part of a systematic pattern of abuse of power within the company. Victoria's expression remained neutral. That's a serious allegation. Against whom? Karen Winters, HR director. Marcus placed his organized folder on the desk, and I'm not her first victim. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus presented his evidence methodically, a timeline, testimonies, documented inconsistencies, and the recording from the restaurant where 2 weeks passed with no word from Victoria Chen. Marcus alternated between hope and despair, checking his email obsessively and jumping whenever his phone rang. The independent investigation she promised seemed increasingly like a polite fiction, a CEO's way of pacifying a disgruntled ex-employee before dismissing his concerns entirely. He finally called Alicia, their first real conversation in weeks. Though guarded, she'd agreed to meet for dinner that weekend. It was a small step, but the prospect gave him something to focus on beyond his crusade against Karen. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon as Marcus was half-heartedly updating his resume. The number was unfamiliar, the voice on the other end professionally neutral. "Mr. Chen, this is Diana Rossi, independent corporate investigator. I've been retained by Evergreen Technologies to look into certain governance matters. CEO Chen suggested we speak. Her tone gave nothing away. I'd like to review your allegations in person. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the Westview Hotel, Suite 712. The Westview was upscale, discreet, and most importantly, non-affiliated with Evergreen. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, his folder of evidence meticulously reorganized for maximum clarity. He prepared answers for potential challenges, practiced maintaining composure if his integrity was questioned again. Diana Rossi was not what he expected. Instead of the stern, suited lawyer type he'd imagined, she was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a demeanor that suggested ex-law enforcement. "I've spent the past week reviewing Evergreen's systems, policies, and your personnel file," she began without preamble. "I'd also interviewed 17 current employees, including Karen Winters." Marcus tensed at Karen's name. "And Ms. Winters has an explanation for everything. Your performance issues, the security flags on your account, concerns from colleagues." Diana's expression remained unreadable. "All documented, all following company protocol." His heart sank. Of course she does. She's had months to build her case. However, Diana continued, "Protocol isn't the same as propriety. When identical procedures lead to drastically different outcomes depending on who's involved, that suggests systemic issues." She opened her laptop. "Let me show you what I've found." For the next hour, Diana walked Marcus through her preliminary findings. Using forensic tools outside Evergreen's monitoring systems, she discovered alarming patterns. Emails deleted from the main server but preserved in the backup archives Devin had mentioned, performance reviews altered after submission, security logs showing login activities from Karen's computer to multiple employee accounts. "She accessed your account 3 times in the week before the alleged security breach," Diana noted, turning her screen to show him the evidence. The downloads that triggered the security alert originated from her IP address, though the system logged them under your credentials. Marcus stared at the data, vindication and outrage warring within him. "She framed me." With considerable skill, Diana agreed. But she made mistakes, the most significant being her pattern of behavior. "Once I identified the inconsistencies in your case, I found identical tactics used against others." She pulled up financial records next. "This is where it gets interesting. I followed approval chains for vendor contracts going back 5 years. 3 companies that received preferential terms share a common element. All have made regular payments to a consulting firm called Winter Solutions, LLC. "Let me guess," Marcus said. "Registered to Karen?" "Her sister," Diana corrected. "But Karen is the silent partner receiving quarterly distributions. Classic kickback structure, carefully constructed to maintain plausible deniability." Marcus absorbed this new information. "What about her nephew?" "Tyler?" Diana's expression hardened slightly. "Mr. Tyler Winters. Presented to Evergreen with a resume claiming a master's degree from Stanford in 3 years at a competitor that recently went defunct. Except Stanford has no record of his attendance, and the defunct company's former executives confirmed he was never employed there." The evidence was more damning than Marcus had imagined. Karen hadn't just manipulated the system to target personal enemies. She committed fraud, accepted kickbacks, and facilitated corporate espionage through her falsified credentials nephew.